In 1915, Birth of a Nation was a technical leap for the motion picture industry. Unfortunately, this technical spectacle created the resurgence and recruiting tool for the white racist supremacy group, the Ku Klux Klan, that would forever change the landscape of Hollywood and the nation. The Birth of a Nation, originally called The Klansman, is a 1915 American silent epic drama film directed by D.W. Griffith and starring Lillian Gish. The screenplay is adapted from Thomas Dixon Jr.'s 1905 novel and play The Klansman. Griffith co-wrote the screenplay with Frank E. Woods and produced the film with Harry Atkin. The film was controversial even before its release and has remained so ever since. It has been called the most controversial film ever made in the United States and the most reprehensible racist film in Hollywood history. Lincoln is portrayed positively, a friend of the South, unusual for a narrative that promotes the lost cause ideology. The film has been denounced for its racist depiction of Black Americans. The film portrays African Americans, many of whom are played by white actors in blackface, as stupid and sexually aggressive towards white women. The Ku Klux Klan is portrayed as a heroic force necessary to preserve American values, protect the women, and maintain white supremacy. In response to the film's depictions of Black people and Civil War history, African Americans across the United States organized and protested. In Boston and other localities, Black leaders tried to have it banned on the basis that it inflamed racial tensions and could incite violence. The NAACP spearheaded an unsuccessful campaign to ban the film. Griffith's indignation at efforts to censor or ban the film motivated him to produce Intolerance the following year. In spite of its divisiveness, The Birth of a Nation was a huge commercial success and profoundly influenced both the film industry and American culture. The film has been acknowledged as an inspiration for the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan, which took place only a few months after its release. In 1992, the Library of Congress deemed the film culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant and selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry.
In 1908, one of the first storytelling movies, The Count of Monte Cristo, was completed in Hollywood after filming had begun in Chicago.
In 1911, a site on Sunset Boulevard was turned into Hollywood's first studio, and soon about 20 companies were producing films in the area. In 1913, Cecil B. DeMille, Jesse Lasky, Arthur Freed, and Samuel Goodwin formed Jesse Lasky's feature play company, later Paramount Pictures. DeMille produced The Squaw Man in a barn 1 block from present-day Hollywood Boulevard and Vine Street, and more box office successes soon followed. Hollywood had become the center of the American film industry by 1915 as more independent filmmakers relocated there from the East Coast. For more than 3 decades, from early silent films through the advent of talkies, figures such as D.W. Griffith, Goldwyn, Adolph Zucker, William Fox, Louis B. Mayer, Darrell F. Zanuck, and Harry Cohn served as overlords of the great film studios 20th Century Fox, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Paramount Pictures, Columbia Pictures, Warner Brothers, and others. Among the writers who were fascinated by Hollywood in its golden age were
F. Scott Fitzgerald, Aldous Huxley, Evelyn Waugh, and Nathanael West.
Today, in some capacity, the original Big Five still remains supreme.
While the so-called Big Five were dominating the motion picture industry, a short-lived yet trailblazing company decided to enter the playing field. The Lincoln Motion Picture Company was an American film production company founded in 1916 by Noble Johnson and George Perry Johnson. Noble Johnson was president of the company. The secretary was actor Clarence A. Brooks. Dr. James T. Smith was treasurer, and Dudley A. Brooks was assistant secretary. The company is known as the first producer of race movies. Established in Omaha, Nebraska, the company relocated to Los Angeles the following year. It remained in operation until 1923, closing shortly after announcing a final project, The Heart of a Negro. In the first 2 decades of the 20th century, African American audiences were ignored by film studios. Because African American audiences were ignored, there was a high demand for films geared to catering to black audiences, thus bringing about the need for black motion picture production companies. The Lincoln Motion Picture Company is considered the first all-black movie production company, building a reputation for making films that showcased African American talent in the film industry. The company made and distributed only 5 films. These films were limited to African American audiences in churches, schools, and colored-only theaters, despite the Johnson brothers wanting a wider audience. Unfortunately, production expenses and low sales halted future films to be made and distributed. Noble left his position as president to become an actor at Universal Pictures, with Dr. James T. Smith taking over the position. The Lincoln Motion Picture Company lasted until 1921. Although the Lincoln Motion Picture Company did not last long, it was influential in the African American community. This company inspired the movement of more ethnic movie companies.
From the ashes of the Lincoln Motion Picture Company came a rising phoenix. Oscar Devereux Micheaux, born January 2nd, 1884, passed away March 25th, 1951, was an African American author, film director, and independent producer of more than 44 films. Although the short-lived Lincoln Motion Picture Company was the first movie company owned and controlled by black filmmakers, Micheaux is regarded as the first major African American feature filmmaker, a prominent producer of race film, and has been described as the most successful African American filmmaker of the first half of the 20th century. He produced both silent films and sound films. Micheaux was born on a farm in Metropolis, Illinois on January 2, 1884. He was the 5th child born to Calvin S. and Belle Micheaux, who had a total of 13 children. In his later years, Micheaux added an E to his last name. His father was born a slave in Kentucky. In his later years, Micheaux wrote about the social oppression he experienced as a young boy. His parents moved to the city so that the children could receive a better education. Micheaux attended a well-established school for several years before the family eventually ran into money troubles and were forced to return to the farm. The discontented Micheaux became rebellious, and his struggles caused problems within his family. His father was not happy with him and sent him away to do marketing in the city. Micheaux found a pleasure in this job because he was able to speak to many new people and learn social skills that he would later reflect in his films.
In 1918, Oscar Micheaux's novel The Homesteader, dedicated to Booker T. Washington, attracted the attention of George Johnson of the Lincoln Motion Picture Company in Los Angeles. After Johnson offered to make The Homesteader into a new feature film, negotiations and paperwork became inharmonious. Micheaux wanted to be directly involved in the adaptation of his book as a movie, but Johnson resisted and never produced the film. Instead, Micheaux founded the Micheaux Film and Book Company of Sioux City in Chicago. Its first project was the production of The Homesteader as a feature film. In addition to writing and directing his own films, Micheaux also adapted the works of different writers for his silent pictures. Many of his films were open, blunt, and thought-provoking regarding certain racial issues of that time. He once commented, "It is only by presenting those portions of the race portrayed in my pictures in the light and background of their true state that we can raise our people to greater heights." Financial hardships during the Great Depression eventually made it impossible for Micheaux to keep producing films, and he returned to writing.
48 years later, after the release of The Homesteader, an American who fled to France learned French to get his shot in directing his directorial debut, where the opportunity was not reciprocated in the country where he was born. Melvin Van Peebles, born August 21st, 1932, passed away September 21st, 2021. was an American actor, filmmaker, playwright, novelist, and composer. He worked as an actor-filmmaker into the 2000s. His feature film debut, The Story of a Three-Day Pass, in 1967, was based on his own French-language novel, La Permission, and was shot in France as it was difficult for a Black American director to get work at that time. The film won an award at the San Francisco International Film Festival, which gained him the interest of Hollywood studios, leading to his American feature debut, Watermelon Man, in 1970. Eschewing further overtures from Hollywood, he used the successes he had so far to bankroll his work as an independent filmmaker. In 1971, he released his best-known work, creating and starring in the film Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, considered one of the earliest and best-regarded examples of the blaxploitation genre. He followed this up with the musical Don't Play Us Cheap, based on his own stage play, and continued to make films, write novels, and stage plays in English and in French through the next several decades. His final films included the French-language film Le Conte du Ventre Plein and the absurdist film Confession Sofa ex Doofus Ich Footed Mother. His filmmaker, and actor Marlon Van Peebles appeared in several of his works and portrayed him in the 2003 biographical film Badass. After the independent success of Sweetback, the major studios took advantage of the newfound black gold to create what is now known as blaxploitation, saving a crippling industry.
Although Peebles is known as the father of blaxploitation, the financial success of the film Superfly shocked Hollywood. Made on a $500,000 budget, Superfly, directed by Black photographer Gordon Parks, earned $11 million at the box office. As a result, the industry flooded theaters with dozens of knockoffs carrying similar aesthetics. However, most directors and filmmakers were white, while the actors black. But it was the first time since Hollywood's inception that blacks dominated top-billed movies. In response, black moviegoers rapidly consumed flicks that featured blacks in gritty urban landscapes fighting the man or the system. Once movies emerged casting blacks as leads and in more nuanced roles, tickets skyrocketed, breathing economic life back into Hollywood. According to Ed Guerra's work on blaxploitation, the profits literally saved Hollywood from total bankruptcy. Just as African American actors began to enjoy some level of celebrity and exposure from the 70s, blaxploitation became an unnecessary cash cow. Unfortunately, it did not make it out of the decade, and it was tucked back into Hollywood's film archives, Guerra said by 1972. Hollywood was fat again, just off of 2 years of black-centered films. By 1975, black exploitation era died due to calculated demolition. Black movie audiences were deprioritized after blaxploitation until the late 1980s, early 90s, when filmmakers such as Spike Lee, followed by John Singleton and the Hughes brothers, emerged in an era of street movies. Around that time, and slightly before, another collective of black filmmakers began producing work in the early 80s, but did not receive commercial backing for their movies, stayed within the theme of resistance and revolution.
Following the footsteps of Michaud and Van Peebles came a fearless and unapologetic filmmaker, Shelton Jackson Spike Lee, influencing and being influenced by the golden age of hip-hop, setting the stage for a more social and conscious storytelling.
We've got 5 great films here, and they're great for one reason, because they tell the truth. But there is one film missing from this list that deserves to be on it, because ironically, it might tell the biggest truth of all, and that's Do the Right Thing. Yes, yes, yes.
Shelton Jackson Spike Lee, born March 20th, 1957, is an American film director, producer, screenwriter, actor, and professor. His production company, 40 Acres and a Mule Filmworks, has produced more than 35 films since 1983. He made his directorial debut with She's Gotta Have It in 1986. He has since written and directed such films as Do the Right Thing, Mo Better Blues, Jungle Fever, Malcolm X, Crooklyn, Clockers, 25th Hour, Inside Man, Chirac, Black Klansman, and The Five Bloods. Lee also acted in 10 of his films.
Now that we gave you a small scope into the history of black cinema, let's bring it closer to the present and how the motion picture industry currently functions.
Many of the same principles of making a motion picture movie has not changed. The major differences are budgets and access to technology that was not available when Hollywood first started.
There are three main phases of making a motion picture: pre-production, principal photography, and post-production.
In pre-production, a script or screenplay is written. This could be from original or licensed material through sources such as adaptations from books, news articles, or comic books.
After the script, bearing any revisions and input from the director, has been finalized, a shooting script and storyboards along with a budget and shooting schedule is set in motion.
In principal photography, the cast and crew shoot on location. During this time, communication by the production manager is sent to the administration or office staff for the producers to make sure the production falls within the allotted schedule and budget.
Once the final scene is shot and wrapped, then the last phase of the project happens before being distributed for public consumption.
In post-production, this is where the footage is edited. Effects and graphics are applied. ADR, automated dialogue replacement, may take place at a post-production facility where actors and actresses record their dialogue for a cleaner sound along with Foley and the music soundtrack for final output.
Typically, 200 to 500 people are hired to make a movie. Obviously, this number could increase dramatically based on the scope of the project and how many additional extras, locations, and CGI work is needed. There are only a handful of black-owned or what used to be majority black-owned companies that might be able to pull off this type of venture within media at the scale of Hollywood movie releases.
If you take Oprah Winfrey, Robert Johnson, Byron Allen, Kathy Hughes, and Tyler Perry's alleged net worth combined, they would not break the 15th wealthiest person's net worth in media in the world. Jeff Bezos and Amazon are number one in a stratosphere of its own.
Speaking of Robert Johnson, America's first black billionaire is calling for $14 trillion in reparations to compensate for slavery, Jim Crow, and 200 years of systemic racism. Robert L. Johnson, America's first black billionaire and founder of Black Entertainment Television, is calling on the federal government to pay out $14 trillion in reparations to black Americans. And he wants a check too. Johnson made the charge in an interview with Vice News published Wednesday. Reparations will require the entire country to admit that the result of slavery has been 200 years of systemic racism, and for that reason, black folks have been denied 13 to 15 trillion of wealth, Johnson told the outlet. And therefore, we as a country now must atone by paying black people of all stripes, the rich ones, the poor ones, and the middle, out of our pocket.
Comcast settled a long-running racial discrimination dispute with black media mogul Byron Allen, agreeing to add 3 of Allen's channels to its cable packages. Allen sued Comcast for $20 billion in 2015 for refusing to carry 7 of his networks, saying it was because of his race. Comcast said it declined to carry the channels because the programming wasn't original or of sufficient quality. Allen also sued Charter, another cable company, for $10 billion for refusing to carry his networks. The case made it to the Supreme Court, which in March reversed a lower court ruling in favor of Allen. The Supreme Court said Allen had to show race was the decisive factor in Comcast's decision not to offer him a contract, not one of several factors. Allen called that ruling harmful to the civil rights of millions of Americans.
Mrs. King said that people would come after you. Why are you not afraid to challenge a company this big or to challenge interests this big?
You know what? Living in fear is another form of slavery. And I'm not a slave. And I burned my knee pads long ago. And you don't need to have fear. You don't need to have fear. If you have God in your life, and you have faith, and you have trust, you're gonna be okay. The people who are really suffering are the people who are living in fear. Those are the people who are suffering. People, they're worried about being blackballed. And I laugh and I say, you're worried about being blackballed? Tell me what you have. Show me what you have. Tell me what you own. You were blackballed the day your black ass was born. But nobody emailed you and told your black ass that you were blackballed. So you're thinking you're walking around and you're not. Well, the moment your black ass was born, your black ass was blackballed. So don't live in fear of this is what's going to happen to me. The moment you don't live in fear is the moment you will be free. That is that moment. But as long as you live in fear, you're just another slave. That's all you are. You're just another slave.
And presently, Oprah Winfrey is no longer the majority owner of OWN Network, with a reported 5% share in the company as of 2020.
The movie industry impacts many other industries economically, from post-production companies, marketing agencies, commercial advertisements, transportation, insurance agencies, Motion Picture Association of America, banks, film commissions, motion picture industry pension and health plans, television, catering, craft services, online streaming services, theaters, security, talent agencies, cast and crew, guilds, union, associations, production locations, police and fire department, storyboard artists, medics, schools, and lighting equipment, and other rental companies, just to name a few.
One specific example are unions. Hollywood's entertainment industry unions have a whiteness problem. Julie Socash, president of the Makeup Artists and Hairstylists Guild, Local 706, also stressed that producers make hiring decisions. She said her local is one of the few that allows work on non-union jobs to qualify for membership. That is how Cheney eventually managed to accrue enough time to join the union. All our members are treated equally, Socash said. We are not able to give preferential treatment to one member over another. Local 706, which does not collect any data on race or ethnicity of its membership, also recently formed a committee to tackle issues of diversity and inclusion and is planning various educational initiatives around race and LGBTQ issues, she said. Although data is scarce, people of color are substantially underrepresented on film crews, experts say. Anecdotally, it appears as if the numbers are really bad, but we haven't been able to get our hands on reliable data to include in our studies of Hollywood diversity and inclusion, said Darnell Hunt, Dean of Social Sciences at UCLA.
Approximately $560 million in revenue was collected across many different unions associated with the film industry in 2019.
Another example are talent agents. The talent agents in Hollywood are some of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry. They are responsible for representing and negotiating deals for their clients. As of 2015, the top 5 Hollywood agents include Kevin Huvane, Ari Emanuel, Brian Lord, Richard Lovett, and Patrick Whitesell.
Yet, what does this mean for Black people who want to pursue this part of the film industry? It isn't easy being a Black talent agent in Hollywood, says New York Times. The New York Times, considered one of the most prestigious newspapers in the U.S., offers a realistic look at what it's like to be a Black talent agent in America. Movies such as Black Panther and Crazy Rich Asians don't come around all that often, partly because of how projects are put together. Chances are the people brokering those deals and determining who gets in the door and what stories are told are white, reports the Times. According to the paper, the number of partners and department heads of color at talent agencies are few and far between. Of the hundreds of film and television representatives working at the 4 top agencies, just a few are black. The Times outlined 7 black agents, 6 with major agencies and 1 who runs her own boutique firm.
So what about film schools? 6 out of the top 10 film schools are in California. Out of the top 25, Howard University was the only HBCU mentioned, coming in at 23.
Now let's get into the finances, shall we? There's no set rule on what's considered what for motion picture budgets. However, we will give you a general understanding of the topic. A micro budget is considered under $25,000. A low budget production would be considered $2 million or less. An average estimated major motion picture budget would be estimated around $65 million. These numbers do not include marketing. So the question is,
do black movies make money?
Let's look at some of the releases in 2018, shall we?
The Hate U Give.
Budget $23 million, worldwide sales close to $35 million.
Black Panther.
Budget $200 million, worldwide sales close to $1.4 billion.
Black Klansman.
Budget $15 million, worldwide sales close to $94 million.
Acrimony.
Budget $20 million, worldwide sales approximately $47 million.
Nobody's Fool.
Budget $19 million, worldwide sales approximately $34 million.
Kings.
Budget currently unknown, worldwide sales $910,000.
Proud Mary.
Budget $14 million, worldwide sales close to $22 million.
Superfly.
Budget $16 million, worldwide sales close to $21 million.
Night School.
Budget $29 million, worldwide sales $103 million.
Blind Spotting.
Budget $1.2 million, worldwide sales $5 million.
In 2018, Marvel produced one of the biggest success stories, if not the biggest success story in cinematic history, Black Panther. Headed into the film's February release, Marvel had made 17 superhero movies, but never a solo superhero movie with a black star or a predominantly black cast. Black Panther ended up making $1.3 billion worldwide, and its $700 million domestic gross was bigger than that of Avengers: Infinity War, which made $678 million domestically. That number makes Black Panther the most successful Marvel movie in the U.S. in the studio's cinematic history. It's also currently the year's highest grossing film in the U.S., Marvel or otherwise.
Even with the highly successful film of Black Panther, there are those, like with Melvin Van Peebles with Blaxploitation, that are reluctant to give credit where credit is due. This is the case with Wesley Snipes in the Blade franchise, which can be argued as the primary film that put the current superhero genre on another trajectory. Irate fans of the original Blade films are reminding people that the Wesley Snipes-led trilogy paved the way for the Marvel Cinematic Universe as it is today. The first Blade was released in 1998 and was a financial success, spawning sequels in 2002 and 2004 and encouraging the trend of superhero movies that would dominate the early 21st century. David S. Goyer's Blade was based on the Marvel Comics character of the same name, a half-vampire, a half-human vampire hunter who possesses all of the strengths of undead bloodsucker and none of their weaknesses. It was also the first successful movie based on a Marvel property, which up to that point included a serial adaptation of Captain America from 1944 and 1986, Howard the Duck. Despite going on to lead a franchise in its own right, with a second installment from acclaimed director Guillermo del Toro, Snipes' Daywalker was eventually overshadowed by the X-Men and Spider-Man films that continued to be made into the 2010s. and these two franchises seem to exist more prominently in recent cultural memory.
Released on August 21st, 1998, Blade was a commercial success. A film budget of $45 million, grossing $70 million at the U.S. box office and $131.2 million worldwide. Despite mixed reviews from film critics, the film received a positive reception from audiences and has since garnered a cult following.
In 2018, Entertainment Weekly sat down with producers Peter Frankfurt and Wesley Snipes, as well as screenwriter David Goyer. We will be reading responses from Goyer and Frankfurt. Goyer: I've been kicking around doing Van Damme movies, that kind of stuff. I had heard that New Line wanted to make a lower budget black superhero film. At the time, Marvel was in bankruptcy, and they'd already sold the rights to X-Men and Spider-Man and a few other things, and I knew they were thinking about Luke Cage, Black Panther.
Frankfurt said, the idea was we would come up with a script for under $10 million movie that would be tough and street-like juice. Kind of hip-hop Marvel movie.
I suggested Blade as a trilogy. I remember I came in and said, I'm going to pitch you the Star Wars of black vampire films. So I pitched it as this racial animosity between the purebloods and the turned vampires, the Young Turks like Deacon Frost. And at the same time, I wanted to talk about race in a subversive way, and it played into this half-breed idea, if you will, to have one foot in each world and not be accepted by either one.
We kept adding scenes like the Blood Club, these big action beats, and when we finally handed it in, it's not like any superhero movie anybody ever seen. It's got elements of kung fu, it's vampire, it's a genre buster. The bad news is, it's freaking expensive.
At one point, the studio came to us and said, can Blade be white? And I said, absolutely effing not. Like, that is just terrible. You cannot do that. Mike DeLuca said, I'll make it for $40 million if you can get Denzel Washington, $35 if you can get Wesley Snipes, and $20 if you can get Lawrence Fishburne. And that was it. We wanted Wesley.
U.S. movie and television productions enjoy widespread distribution with a global audience. In 2020, the estimated revenue of the industry was $91.4 billion.
So what does this mean for diversity within a lucrative industry? Of the top 185 films of 2020, more than half were released via streaming platforms. Of the films that had a theatrical release, minority audiences accounted for the bulk of ticket purchases. Films with casts that were at least 20% minority enjoyed the highest online viewing ratings among all racial groups in the all-important 18 to 49 age category. Women and people of color gained ground in all job categories tracked by the report: lead actors, total cast, writers, and directors. People of color and women are still underrepresented as film writers and directors in typically helmed lower budget films. In the next few moments, we will be highlighting a few data points from the 2019 UCLA Hollywood Diversity Report authored by Dr. Darnell Hunt, Dr. Anna Cristina Ramon, and Michael Tran.
People of color's share of the writers credited for top films was flat over the 7 years examined in the report series. 7.6% in 2011 and nearly identical 7.8% in 2017. People of color would have to multiply their 2017 share by 5 to reach proportionate representation in this employment arena.
In 2017, people of color claimed a 12.6% share of directors from the top films for the second straight year. This figure is virtually identical to the group's 12.2% share posted in 2011. The first year considered in this report series, minorities would have to multiply their 2017 share by more than 3 to reach proportionate representation among film directors.
In 2017, people of color purchased the majority of the tickets for half of the top 10 films ranked by global box office, matching the number for 2016 observed in the previous report. 7 of 10 films for 2017 featured casts that were at least 21% minority.
In 2017, films featuring majority-minority cast posted the highest median domestic box office at $45.5 million. Meanwhile, films with casts that were from 41% to 50% minority were released in the most theaters, on average 2,880, and had the highest mean opening weekend rank at 7.4. It is worth noting that films with casts that were less than 11% minority had the lowest median domestic box office and opening weekend rank in 2017.
In 2017, the 17 top films with casts that were from 31% to 40% minority posted both the highest median global box office, $169.8 million, and the largest average number of international markets, 59.5. By contrast, the 15 top films with majority-minority casts were released in the smallest average number of markets, 48.1. Despite claiming the second highest median box office, $123.1 million.
The median return on investment peaked for films with casts that were majority-minority in 2017, followed closely by films with casts that were from 41% to 50% minority. By contrast, films with casts that were less than 11% minority had the lowest median return on investment in 2017. China was the largest international box office market in 2017, accounting for $7.9 billion in ticket sales. Of the 13 top films with black leads in 2017, only one was distributed in China, 7.7%. The animated feature by My Little Pony, the movie. By contrast, 39.6% of the top 134 films with white leads were distributed in China that year. Though there were only 9 top films with mixed race leads in 2017, 4 of those films were released in China. In the report's conclusion, it states, "The marginalization of diverse groups in Hollywood is an old story, one dating back to the origins of the film industry over a century ago. Hollywood has always been a bastion of whiteness, a highly lucrative and insular industry in which white men dominate the positions of power." In a 2013 Al Jazeera piece titled "Hollywood Comes to Terms with Slavery," it quotes 12 Years a Slave as, "A major motion picture finally tells the story of slavery in sober, graphic detail. It is aesthetic without aestheticizing violence, and it places the experience of the slaves themselves firmly at the center of the story. And yet, something is still missing: the complicity of the rest of American society. As you have witnessed, not much has changed. The story of America, like the story of Hollywood, continues to overlook the travesties, the transgressions, and the need for atonement for the centuries of malfeasance against the very people, the descendants of U.S. chattel slavery, that built this great country. Until then, thank you for watching. This is Blacklisted.